Chapter 2 of Monsters, Part 1. Twilight's ear flicked. Her head shot up, ear swiveling. Was that a hoof step she had heard? The shifting sigh of the rubble settling around her? Or merely another imagined disturbance?
You're like the helpless rabbit afraid of crossing the fox. Pitiful.
She ignored the comment, like the 100 others the other had sneered at her that day. Or was it still yesterday? It was impossible to tell among the broken bones of Canterlot, where the sun and moon had abandoned the streets centuries ago, and the slightest sound could draw sharp fangs and hungry maws. There were no singing songbirds to mark the morning, and no calling crickets to welcome the night, and often Twilight would find herself blinking in confusion, wondering how long it had been as each waking bled across the blurry borders of fitful sleep into the next. At first, she had tried counting seconds, but the sound of the numbers growing ever larger in her head had nearly been enough to drive her to tears. Even then, how could she know if her count was accurate? No. The only thing she had to measure time by were her meals, each one stolen from the city in the basements of collapsed homes or among the sagging walls of whatever towers still stood. She always waited until she was hungry to eat, because that was the only way she could think of to keep the time in between consistent. She had eaten 5 meals since arriving in Canterlot. She didn't count what she had done upon first arriving, because that, of course, was not a meal. The mushrooms that she sometimes found in damp places weren't very filling either, but she took some comfort in the process of preparing them. Not hearing anything else, Twilight returned her attention to the iron pan that she had nestled among the loose bricks of her current sanctuary. She thought that maybe it had been a clothing store, if the color-drained rags hanging from the racks in the main room were any indication. More importantly, part of the ceiling had collapsed over a circular cashier's booth in the back, creating a small cave accessible by a single crawl space. Thus it was that Twilight was able to muster the courage to light her horn, cringing at the soft tinkle of her magic, and inject a little more energy into the pan. It took forever to cook mushrooms at this pace, and she applied heat sparingly, and never put in so much energy that they might sizzle. But at the end of it, she could take her time and savor the bland, dry taste of unseasoned, undercooked mushrooms. She relished it.
Don't lie to yourself, little flower,
the other hissed.
It tastes of sand and bleached bones. We cannot live on these stolen scraps. It tastes amazing,
Twilight insisted, glaring up at herself. Perhaps if she forced enough sternness into her gaze, she could convince at least one of the voices in her head. The other laughed. Twilight wished that she could laugh, or shout, or even cry without clamping a hoof over her mouth. She desperately needed such release. Twilight shook her head and looked back to her pan, feeling the air above it with her frog.
I've cooked mushrooms hundreds of times in my life. It'll taste fine. If I could just find a little seasoning, it would be better.
Guessing that they were about done, Twilight levitated the shriveled little things out of the pan and began slipping them into her mouth. The heat was good, and her sharp teeth sliced through the tender flesh easily, but the taste was of cardboard. She grit her teeth, resisting the urge to shout in frustration and fling them all into the dust. What was wrong with her?
You know what's wrong. You need meat. Never again.
Was she getting skinnier? It was hard to tell in the dim light she allowed from her horn, but her legs seemed thinner than before. Maybe it was just the shadows messing with her head. The other allowed her to finish eating in silence, something that she was grateful for. She ate slowly, telling herself that she did it for her health and not because of the taste. And still the food was gone too fast. Her mind wandered as she cast a small spell to clean the pan of any residue. She wrapped it in thick layers of tattered cloth and tied it to her back with a frayed rope. She had come to Canterlot for solace, and yet her waking moments were dominated by apprehension, doubt, and fear. She always woke up with bags under her eyes and an ache in her hooves. The rubble groped at her coat with sharp spurs of rock as she crawled out of her refuge and into the dry air of the clothing shop. She refused to travel in the open streets, but they weren't needed to navigate the shattered urban sprawl of the city. Lavender light, dim as a dying candle, pushed the walls of darkness back as she braced herself to travel once more. The buildings had lost distinct shape long ago. The ruins all ran together now, forming a network of half-unformed rooms and sunken roofs. She crept through these at a snail's pace, sending out small pings to ensure that the next room was empty before crawling through, jumping at every distant howl and screech. She had been lucky enough to not cross paths with any changelings yet, and she thanked Celestia for that small fortune. She should reach the castle today, she was almost certain. What distance had been crossed in harrowing minutes when she fled Canterlot now took infinitely longer. But if her memory was correct, then she was now traversing the inner arm of the merchant's quarter. There would be a brief sprint across open ground through the gardens, and then she would be there. She wasn't sure what she was going to do once she got there, but still, it was a plan.
Rarity?
Rarity blinked, looking up from her tea. Fluttershy was eyeing her from across the table with obvious concern.
Oh, I'm sorry, darling. Did you say something? Well, Pinky was asking you about the cookies.
Fluttershy tipped her head to the side, where Pinkie Pie was watching with a goofy grin.
Oh, yes, of course.
Rarity levitated one of the cookies off the pile in the center of the table and took a bite. She let out a petite hum of appreciation before swallowing.
Delightful as always, Pinky dear. I don't know how you do it.
Pinky's smile grew taut at the edges.
The same way I always do, silly filly.
Rarity answered with a polite titter, even as she mentally chastised herself.
Of course. I don't know what I was thinking.
They were in Pinky's guest room at the Titus estate, sharing tea and cookies over a small round table while a cool breeze carried the sounds of construction and labor in through the open window. Whereas Rarity and Fluttershy were seated on cushions, Pinky was sprawled out on her belly in the middle of her bed. Her hind legs were splayed limply behind her, their stillness made all the more eerie by the energetic movements of her front half, and Rarity couldn't help but steal quick glances at them whenever Pinky looked away. But she should have known better than to refer to them so directly. Pinky had obviously needed help to bake the cookies. Her tail was always flat and dull now, regardless of her mood, and her mane had never quite reached its original vibrancy. A heavy silence had settled into place over the room. To Rarity's surprise, it was Fluttershy that broke its hold.
What happened to us, girls?
Rarity blinked. Pinky's smile stretched wider.
What do you mean, Shy? It's just... Why don't I feel anything?
Fluttershy looked down, holding a hoof to her chest, where her heart was hidden.
So many terrible things have happened, and I don't feel anything. Shouldn't I be upset? What do you mean, darling?
Rarity leaned forward and touched the Pegasus's trembling hoof.
It's just so much,
Fluttershy whispered.
Rainbow's Eye, Twilight's mind.
She turned to Rarity and Pinky in turn.
Your independence and your legs. I think I'm next.
Pinky's smile waned. She looked as if she wanted to spring out of bed and rush to Fluttershy's side.
Oh, Shy. I can't feel it any more girls?
Fluttershy's shaking grew stronger, sapping the strength from her voice.
I used to be so scared. So sad. I think my heart filled up and broke. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Rarity shot out of her seat and rushed to her friend's side.
Shh. It's okay. Whatever could you possibly have to apologize for? We're all falling apart.
Fluttershy sucked in a breath as she buried her face in Rarity's shoulder.
I don't even know what's doing it. I want to help, but all I can do is cower and cry, and now I can't even do that right.
Rarity flinched at the loathing in Fluttershy's normally demure voice. She ran a hoof through Fluttershy's mane, whispering small words of comfort. At the same time, she lit her horn, grabbing Pinky's hind legs in her magic and helping her come to Fluttershy's side. They passed several minutes like that, sometimes exchanging concerned glances as their friend wept between them. There was nothing they could say to comfort her, and so they consoled her instead with the silent support of their bodies. Fluttershy's sobs grew quiet at last. Pinky gave her a little squeeze before asking,
Are you alright?
Fluttershy took a deep breath. Her voice was quiet, barely audible, but firm.
I'm a monster. Oh, you know that's not right, darling.
Rarity chided softly.
How could you ever think such a dreadful thing? You don't understand.
Fluttershy said.
Neither of you do. You face the world, you cry for it, and you only come back stronger.
A heavy sigh rocked her body as she looked up, her mane falling away to reveal the wet trails dripping down her cheeks.
I don't deserve to be here with you girls.
Pinky tightened her grip on the Pegasus.
You're right.
Fluttershy sucked in a shaky breath. Rarity raised a brow at that, but Pinky pressed on.
You don't deserve to be here.
Pinky continued.
All the fun and light's been stolen from the world. And you of all ponies deserve better.
Rarity realized she was holding her breath. She didn't quite feel comfortable enough to let it out yet.
Careful, Pinky. But we're all in this together,
Pinky said.
And I know that I'm happy to have you with us.
A heavy silence draped over the three mares. Rarity could sense Fluttershy weighing Pinky's words from behind her flowing pink mane. She wanted to say something more, but how could she? She dared not even move, lest the slightest mistake nudge her friend past the beckoning threshold of despair. At last, Fluttershy spoke. It was quiet, barely piercing the silence, but it carried a fragile hope that made Rarity sigh in relief.
Thank you, girls,
she said, peeking around her mane with the smallest of smiles.
I think I'll be okay. Woohoo!
With a moment of crisis behind them, Pinky wasted no time in shouting the silence away.
Now help me back up so we can get back to your tea party. Oh, well, it's not really my tea party,
Fluttershy said, blushing as she supported Pinky back to the bed.
You made the cookies and Rarity made the tea.
Sensing her moment to help lighten the mood, Rarity waved the notion away with a melodramatic scoff and flip of her mane.
Oh, nonsense, darling. You're the one who arranged this little banquet, and it's you we have to thank.
She added a warm smile.
I think we all needed a break.
Pinky, who had already stuffed her muzzle full of cookies, gave an exaggerated nod. Fluttershy didn't let out the giggle that Rarity had been hoping for, but her smile grew more genuine. As Rarity poured herself more tea, she decided not to push the matter. She would take any victory she could find. Where Twilight had expected solid rock, her hooves instead swept through open air. Her heart dropped out of her chest as her body swung down into the gap, and she failed to resist the urge to let out a rising shout of alarm. Her back smacked against the ground before she even truly realized she was falling, forcing a grunt of pain from her lungs. She smacked her hooves over her muscles so hard that the sting made her flinch. Above her, the other's floating face formed into a toothy grin.
You're just adorable sometimes. Quiet!
Twilight remained totally still as she listened to small bits of rubble settle around her. A faint changeling screech echoed in the distance, answered seconds later by others. Was that in relation to her, or just the changelings communicating amongst themselves like normal? If it was possible to tell just from sound, she didn't know how. Slowly, cautious not to make more noise, Twilight rolled onto her belly, pushed herself off the ground, and set out a few pings. No immediate danger jumped out at her, but she was surprised by just how large the room she found herself in was. Peering up with a lit horn, she confirmed that she couldn't see the ceiling. Her lips pursed in thought. She had been crawling through the far more confined remains of a fallen tower, and after a sudden drop, found herself in a large, unusually intact room. Looking around and pushing a little more magic into her horn, she caught a glimpse of a rotten bed frame. The sheets were faded, but the design was familiar enough to elicit a gasp of recognition. White stars on a pale blue background, with a single line of 4 ethereal colors running across the top. Her vision blurred a watery red as she approached the ragged bedsheet and ran a hoof over those 4 colors. She closed her eyes and rested a cheek against the fabric, yearning for happier times. It hurt to be so close. How could the frayed threads still be so soft when everything else had turned dry and brittle around them? How could only this one part of her home persevere when everything else had died without her? It would have hurt less to find the sheets ripped to shreds.
Crying over bed sheets now. You infuriate me. I'll give it a rest.
Twilight couldn't muster the energy for anger, but exasperation was both easy and satisfying.
Everything infuriates you. False. Weakness infuriates me. Weakness within our own body doubly so. I know that you have a strength inside you, little flower, desperate to get out. I catch glimpses of it when you play at commanding us, when you refuse to let us do as is required to achieve our goals. And there is nothing more infuriating than watching us waste away while that strength cowers behind your foolish ideals.
Twilight blinked. When she pulled her head off of the old bed, ignoring the red stains where her tears had fallen, she saw the other leering down at her in barely restrained fury.
Our goals? Have I ever sought anything else?
The other chose to let her mouth move with her voice, and it made her spite abundantly clear.
Have I ever done anything but attempt to protect our allies? To destroy our foes? I know where I stand, little flower, but you restrain me with your hesitation, and I hate it.
Twilight shook her head as she turned away from the bed.
We're in the castle now. I need to find the archives.
Feeling more comfortable within the castle walls, Twilight used her horn light to find a door to the hall. After a quick spell to oil the hinges and a brief application of force, it swung open in silence. The other was waiting for her on the other side.
Denial. You're other despicable half shows itself, for in those brief moments where you aren't refusing to do what is necessary, you instead insist that there is nothing to do at all.
Twilight grit her teeth as she stalked deeper into the castle in search of a landmark to get her bearings.
You're my despicable other half. Your attempts at wit don't make your lies any more seductive, fool. You know I speak the truth. What purpose does it serve for one of our nature to insist on this self-inflicted ignorance?
A familiar intersection appeared from the darkness, and Twilight took the rightmost path. If that was what remained of the crest of the first guards, then that meant that the castle barracks were to the left, and that meant... Twilight licked her lips. Her hooves pushed her faster. The other haunted the corners of her vision.
It's almost impressive, from a certain perspective. You pride yourself on reason, and yet you avoid it at all costs if it breaks your fallacious reality. How many times have I stopped you from driving us to destruction, blinded by your refusal to accept the reality? I would ask how well you sleep at nights, but I already know you rarely do.
Here, the wall had collapsed into a pile of bricks on one side. The shattered corpses of two wooden doors could just be seen jutting out from the rubble, displaced from their proper place by the weight of the stone. Twilight frowned as she sent a ping out and failed to find a way past the collapsed doorway. Now, teleporting past it would be trivial, even in her current state, but the pomp of the teleportation spell could travel a long way in the ruins of Canterlot, and who could know what creature might be enticed by the unusual noise. She glanced up and down the hall and considered looking for an alternative route. She might be able to find another way in unobstructed by rubble that would make less noise. She had a decent idea of the servant paths, and if those were blocked off, then she could try going up a level to see if the ceiling had fallen in, or... With a flash of anger, the other surged inside her, coiling her magic around its dark claws. A red-tinged flash of purple overtook her, and with a loud pop, Twilight found herself inside the royal kitchens of Canterlot Castle. The other was waiting inside with a bloody sneer.
Is it so much to ask for even one display of confidence? What?
A shiver ran down Twilight's spine as she wrested control of her magic back. Heat blossomed in her breast, and she marched up to the other with fire in her voice.
Don't do that! Why not?
It jeered.
You would have just wasted our time trying to satisfy your feeble anxieties.
Twilight let out a loud, sharp laugh.
Waste time? Look around, we have nothing but time. No, we do not.
The other snapped its fangs in her face with the words, causing her to flinch back from the rancid stench of its breath.
Despite your clever ignorance, we are starving! You may be able to delude yourself into crawling through this old castle searching for back doors while our body wastes away, but I am hungry!
Twilight hesitated. Was that desperation she heard?
How? You don't have a body. We share a body, you fool.
The other spat.
We share a single hunger, a single thirst, and a single pain. If you don't stop lying to yourself long enough to accept that we are starving, then we will both die.
Twilight looked away. She tried to keep her voice firm.
I know that we're hungry. Why do you think I brought us here?
The other spoke slowly, each word dripping with venom.
You brought us to a pony kitchen. We need fresh meat, not dry flowers nested in stale bread. You're wrong,
Twilight said. She lit her horn bright, illuminating the dusty cupboards, broken jars, and battered pots of the kitchen that once fed her and so many others.
I just need to find something more nutritional, and a better way to cook it.
The other didn't answer her with words, so much as a guttural scream. Twilight ignored it. She had gotten very good at ignoring things in the past few days.
Please wait in here. Mr. Rich will be along to see you shortly.
Wait, what?
Rainbow asked. She stopped in the threshold of the open door as Applejack and Sea Saber walked through it, turning to face the brightly clad servant directly.
I thought we were going to see him right now.
The servant gave a slight shake of her head with an apologetic smile.
I'm sorry, but Mr. Rich is entertaining company right now. He's been looking forward to speaking with you, though, and will join you as soon as he can. Is there anything I can get you in the meantime?
Rainbow flicked her tail irritably, stepping into the room.
Whatever. It's fine.
Applejack faced the mirror properly before tipping her hat with a sincere smile. Don't mind her, Sugar Cube. We'll sit tight.
We apologize for the inconvenience.
With a small curtsy, the servant shut the door behind them. Her hoofsteps faded into the distance. The room was like many of the others that could be found within the rich estate, which was to say that it was too large to take in with one eye, offensively colorful, and mostly occupied by odd furniture and art. Soft orchestral music drifted around the room from an unseen source.
Sounds like something Twilight would like. I can't believe he's blowing us off like this,
Rainbow groaned.
We had an appointment.
Y'all ain't never missed an appointment, Rainbow? Applejack joked. Rainbow shot her a glare and she held her hooves up placatingly. Calm down, Philly. I'm sure he'll come see us soon enough. Sea Saber marched over to the bookshelves that lined one of the walls, grabbed a small book, and made herself comfortable in the cushioned nook of a wing-shaped sofa. He'll see us when he's ready. Rainbow snorted.
And when's that, huh?
Saber didn't look up from her book, but she did give a quick shrug. When he gets bored of his current company, or when his scheduler annoys him enough. Whichever comes first.
Ah, great.
With a heavy sigh, Rainbow flapped her wings and dropped her flank into a plush seat shaped like an upturned velvet hoof. Applejack spent a few seconds leering at the third and only remaining seat in the room, a wide, circular sofa with a curved central backrest modeled after a large, squat unicorn's horn, before opting to just lean against the wall and pull her hat over her eyes. Rainbow didn't understand how other ponies could be so comfortable with anything as pointless as waiting. She considered herself a mare of action. Whatever the endeavor, whether it be a physical feat to perform, a new skill to master, or a rival to best, she took comfort in the application of effort. She used to always know where she stood. She was Rainbow Dash, Pegasus extraordinaire, future greatest wonderbolt in history. The mare who could do anything. Yet it seemed all she could do in the future, when ponies needed her more than ever, was wait. She had spent every dive on the sidelines, listening to Twilight confront monsters and watching Applejack learn to load torpedoes and make repairs. She had needed rescuing from Gava, and the monster possessing Twilight hadn't even spared her a glance when it swatted her away back on Alta Lucia. The days of travel aboard the Argo were made easier with her daily practice sessions with Sea Saber, but now that she had finally arrived at Highton and was given a chance to do something, she was forced to wait. She flicked a glance Applejack's way.
How does she do it?
How could the cow pony close her eyes and sit still when Twilight needed their help? Rainbow scanned the room for a clock, but all she saw was art on the walls. She began to tap a hoof. Maybe she should just go find Twilight herself. She could get to Canterlot with a couple hours of flying, and Sea Saber would probably let her borrow some dive gear. She could have Twilight back in Highton before the sun rose tomorrow. Maybe then she'd be able to get a full night's sleep.
Don't be stupid, Rainbow. Splitting up even more is the last thing you all need.
Rainbow began chewing her bottom lip. She wouldn't be a slave to her impulses, but she had to do something. So, she settled for the thing that had kept her sane in similar situations before. Griping.
How much longer?
She asked. Applejack peeked out from under the brim of her hat. Y'all know we ain't got any clue more than y'all do, right?
And I'm sure you know that we don't have time to be waiting on a pansy rich pony that won't keep his appointments, Rainbow snapped. We've been here forever.
It's been 10 minutes, Sea Saber said. She had been sitting almost as still as a statue for that entire time, her flank cushioned among the soft velvet of one of several thick sofas arranged around the room.
Might as well be 10 days,
Rainbow grumbled. Applejack was watching her with a thoughtful look. It was a look that Rainbow knew well, and she looked away in the hopes that her old friend would be able to take a hint. No luck. Applejack pushed off of the wall and sat down at Rainbow's side, completely ignoring the lack of space on the little seat.
How you feeling?
I'm fine, AJ.
Oh yeah? Guess that's why y'all have been pacing around the ceiling like a June bug who can't find a window?
Rainbow cocked her head, turning to face her friend.
I've been sitting right here the whole time.
Applejack nodded as if that was exactly what she had just said.
And you've been bouncing your hooves and twitching your wings too. But I ain't talking about just today.
Rainbow didn't bother to try hiding her eye roll. Her ears twitched at the sound of hooves passing out in the hall as she took a sudden interest in Sea Saber's book. Narrowing her eye, she could just make out the title. Myths of the Wildlands.
Come on, Sugar Cube, look at me, will ya?
What was the author's name? It was too small for her to read. Part of her wondered if she would have been able to read it if she still had both eyes. And she couldn't help but flick her tail at the remembered image of a sneering Gava standing over her, framed in red. Her wings shifted as she imagined the weight of her blades resting against her feathers.
She'll get what's coming to her. I'll make sure of it next time.
Rainbow Dash.
Would you give it a rest already?
There wasn't much room to spare with the two ponies on the little seat, but Rainbow found room to scoot into anyways.
I don't want to talk.
So y'all keep telling me, but guess what?
A coarse-furred orange hoof grabbed Rainbow's cheek and pulled her face to face with Applejack, drawing an irate growl from the Pegasus.
I don't care. Last time I had a friend acting all strange, she would always tell me she didn't want to talk, and guess where she's at now?
Rainbow already had her mouth open for a biting retort, but those words took the heat out of her fire. She pulled her muzzle out of Applejack's grip and looked away, anyways.
That's not gonna happen to me, AJ. Magic's got nothing to do with my issue.
Only too late did Rainbow realize her mistake. She could practically hear the grin on Applejack's face.
Oh, so you admit y'all got an issue then?
Rainbow threw her hooves up in exasperation.
Oh, fine, whatever. Point is, I'm not gonna go crazy and jump into the ocean or anything like that. So I'm fine.
There's more to being fine than not getting possessed by magical critters,
Applejack said.
And I sure as hey ain't looking to learn the same friendship lesson twice, so I'm not dropping this until y'all talk to me. So talk.
Rainbow blew out a loud raspberry. She smirked as she saw Sea Saber briefly shake her head at her book.
Okay. Why don't we bet on it?
Rainbow turned it to face Applejack, stretching the smirk into a cocksure grin.
If you can beat me in a race, then I'll talk. If I win, you have to leave me alone about it.
Rainbow Dash, I'm not gonna race you through the halls when we're both somebody's guest.
Applejack let out an exasperated sigh.
Let's just do a hoof wrestle and you're on.
Rainbow tossed her mane.
I want a race.
What, you don't think you can beat me in a simple contest of strength?
Applejack asked.
No, I get it. I am a pretty strong mare. Guess if a race is what you want.
She stood up, beginning to stretch her legs. Rainbow grit her teeth. She couldn't just turn down a clear challenge to her strength like that, and Applejack knew it.
Fine, hoof wrestle, pony up.
Without another word, the two mares scooted off of the tiny hoof-shaped chair, turned around, and squared off. Rainbow made a show of flaring her wings, taking to the air to stretch her forelegs out before couching one elbow in the soft cushioning of the hoof chair. Applejack didn't stretch, but she did give a small chuckle and pull her hat back before locking fetlocks with her opponent. Rainbow made sure to arrange herself so that she could see Sea Saber in the corner of her right eye, and she smirked as she saw the laconic Pegasus put her book down and begin to watch with a benign expression.
You ready to get beat, AJ?
Applejack blew a lock of mane out of her face.
Really? I ain't here to put on a show.
Rainbow snorted.
3, 2, 1, go!
In an instant, Rainbow's world narrowed down to just her and her opponent. She clenched her jaw as she tried and failed to hold in a groan of effort, her forelegs shaking with the strain of holding back defeat. Her shoulder began to ache, and she spared a moment to make eye contact with Applejack and offer up a cocky grin. The cow pony responded with a forced smirk. Rainbow winced as the pain in her shoulder flared up, and Applejack seized the opportunity. Rainbow could only watch as her hoof was forced to the side and down into the soft folds of the seat. Applejack reared up with a whoop of celebration.
Oh, yeah, that's a wrap, Sugar Cube. Y'all owe me a heart-to-heart.
Rainbow stuck her tongue out in disgust as she climbed back to her hooves.
Fine, whatever.
Her ears flicked at the sound of the doors opening behind her, and she turned around to see Crazy Rich walk into the room, wearing a set of clashingly colorful robes and a beaming smile.